as well to learn from you and to listen to your thoughts and concerns. Also, as a reminder, if you're communicating with folks who can't make it here tonight, that we are live streaming this event on KPU TV's YouTube channel, and if folks are at home, they can also watch it on channel 675. I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the City Council's process to this point before I turn it over to our consultants, ECG Management consultants. I think, as most of you are aware, the city owns the Ketchikan Medical Center facility and campus. It was built in 1963, and it's gone through several different expansions and renovations. We started this process of discussing the lease agreement that we currently have with Peace Health probably last March, when we were approached by Peace Health that the current lease agreement that we have with Peace Health to operate the Ketchikan Medical Center would be expiring in 2023, and we wanted to begin the discussion on how we move forward with a new lease arrangement with Peace Health well in advance of that 2023 expiration, so that both parties could plan for operation of the facility. As part of that, we recognize that in negotiating and determining a modern lease, an operating lease perhaps for the Ketchikan Medical Center, the city of Ketchikan wasn't really in a position or had the expertise on staff to negotiate and partake in that project. So we reached out to ECG Management consultants who have years of experience in assisting municipalities and other groups with negotiating lease agreements with medical centers and hospitals and other providers, and also developing negotiation strategies. This past May, the City Council authorized a contract with ECG Management consultants to assist the city in this process. Right now, we are in phase 1 of that process with ECG, and this includes a situational assessment of Ketchikan, which includes events very much like this one, a community forum in which we're trying to understand the needs and the thoughts of the community. ECG is also conducting comprehensive interviews, and we're also conducting and collecting data via email. A final report from ECG, we're hoping to have that sometime this fall, and this will serve as the basis with which to move forward with conversations with Peace Health for continued operation of the Ketchikan Medical Center. Really, though, this evening is for all of you and for the community, in the hopes that we can learn more about your experiences with Peace Health, what is working at the facility, what needs improvement, and what other types of services you would like to see rendered at the Ketchikan Medical Center. Can we actually advance to the next slide? Perfect, meeting objectives. So we have a couple of things that we'd like to discuss with all of you and hope to achieve tonight. Obviously, you'll be meeting our consultants and getting a better understanding of this project and the goals of the engagement. ECG will provide a brief overview of the current lease arrangement with Peace Health for operation of the Ketchikan Medical Center. And again, this is really the opportunity, or a main opportunity, to hear from the community about your experiences, your opinions, and all of this information will be taken under consideration by our consultants and the City Council as we move forward with developing a negotiation strategy. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn it over to ECG. I'm going to introduce everybody first. So this is Kevin Kennedy, a principal with ECG. Dan Merlino, another principal with ECG, and Kelly McFadden, who has been our project manager. So this is the team that we are working with. They've been in town for the past couple days, and I think they're already discovering and learning quite a bit about our community. So welcome, thank you. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention, sorry, Kevin, is we are hoping with public comment, we do have a sign-in sheet that I've collected. We just have a couple folks on it to start the conversation. We would like to limit everybody to 5 minutes to give everybody the opportunity to say what they would like to say. We have 2 microphones there, sort of on either side of the room, and I can certainly help with the mics and run them around the room as needed if folks don't want to come to the front. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lacey, and thanks to all of you for coming today. We've been looking forward to starting this project, and we're happy to see as many of you as there are here today to help us get started. Before we get further into the agenda, I want to take just a minute to talk about our firm, ECG Management Consultants, because some of you probably have questions about who are these guys anyway. Well, ECG has been around since the early 70s. We have always done work in healthcare integration and healthcare contracts. That's a big part of what we do. So we have often looked at management arrangements like the one that's in place. We have advised several municipalities in terms of understanding what's the best thing to do with their owned hospitals and their relationship with management companies. So like I said, we've been around for a long time. It's actually our 45th anniversary this year. We have about 230 consultants. We work only in healthcare and specifically only with healthcare providers. And so that means we work with medical groups, academic medical centers, hospitals, and health systems. So we don't do devices or pharma or things like that. So we're very focused on working with institutions like your hospital. That's really what we do. We have 10 offices across the country. Like I mentioned, several hundred consultants. We're proud to have won a number of awards, including the Class Award last year for being the best healthcare management consulting firm. And we're quite pleased to be here. We do a lot of things in healthcare: strategy, finance, operations, and technology. So we like to think that we can bring a full spectrum of analysis and opinions and be able to look at lots of different issues to every project that we have. So that's who we are. In terms of more specific information on the team, I'm Kevin Kennedy. I'm a principal at ECG. I've been with the firm this is my 28th year. I'm based out of the Seattle office, so in my career I've had a lot of different clients up in Alaska. So I understand that there are lots of differences between Alaska and what goes on in the lower 48 in terms of reimbursement, in terms of how care is delivered, in terms of just things that are different in terms of being on an island instead of being in a metropolitan area. So I've worked with lots of critical access hospitals, lots of rural facilities, and so I think I come equipped to help address these issues. Dan Molino is also a principal with ECG. He is, I think, the only person at ECG who has been there longer than I have. He's been there, I think, 31 years. Dan and I have done a lot of work together. When I started ECG, Dan was my boss, actually. It was a lot of fun for me that a quarter century later, I was then his boss for a brief period of time. But now we're essentially partners. So Dan also does a lot of this work. It was Dan who first got the phone call from the city to help with doing this work. Kelly McFadden is our project manager. She's been with ECG for a little bit over 5 years. She helps us. She helps keep us organized. We'll prepare drafts of deliverables and supervise the analytical team, who you probably will not meet, who is in the background looking at data, crunching numbers, and helping us do our evaluation. So we're your consultants. Again, thank you very much for having us here. We've been looking forward to this project and are excited to be kicking it off. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who's going to walk us through the specifics of this project.
I never really liked having Kevin as my boss. I just want to say that. No, we've always worked well together, very well together. But what I want to do now is talk about the project and how we're approaching it from the objectives, and then talk a little bit about the background of the agreement between the city and Peace Health and the evolution of that agreement. First of all, the objective here is to really understand your needs and concerns, as it says up there, and reach an agreement that will reflect those considerations. So, the sort of cut and dried way to do this is to just get hired to come up and create a negotiation strategy and negotiate the agreement. But that lacks the kind of sensitivity to what's really needed from the community in terms of where we need to take this relationship, not only presently, but for the next 10 years or however long the horizon is on the next agreement. So that's very, very important to us. We think that we need to understand the sort of good things, bad things, opportunities, issues, all of that going into developing this negotiation strategy. So in doing that, what we do is we review the current contract, which we've already done, and we also collect data around things that are pertinent to that contract that have to do with demographic data, operational data, financial data, that sort of thing. We then engage the community as we're doing this week and have done for a while now in terms of getting your perspectives through the email, through a lot of comprehensive interviews that we've done over the past couple of days and phone interviews that we will do in the next couple of weeks. We will also have another community forum next time we are up here in a few weeks. We will also do extensive interviews with, and we have done some with people from Peace Health, so we will really kind of cover the waterfront in terms of getting those full community perspectives. Then we look at what does that tell us? Where have we gleaned insight as to what the really important priorities are for the community and for this arrangement in the future? That's when we start to develop the negotiation strategy. In looking at that, we work very closely with the city in trying to figure out what's important and what to focus on, and then we assist in negotiating a new contract and hopefully get to the finish line with Peace Health in terms of creating, as I say, that modernized contract that reflects the community's opportunities moving forward. If that were to not occur, certainly then there would be kind of the nuclear option, which would be to issue an RFP for potential operators to operate the hospital. But that is not something that we are pursuing as an eventuality. Rather, it's something that will happen if there's just an impasse going forward, which we do not anticipate. All right, so that's the process. The process visually is phase one, the situational assessment, phase two, the Peace Health contract negotiations, and then the contingency plan, as it says, is phases 3 and 4 in terms of a renegotiation, issuance of an RFP and renegotiation. So that's just the visual thing. And the next thing we'll show you, the next slide, will show you that we will be working very comprehensively with the city. The red dots you see up there are working sessions that we will continually have over these next few months. And you can see this schedule runs into the end of December. And also steering committee meetings and meetings with the city council to discuss the progress of what we're doing. So it's a very in-depth process moving forward. All right. I should mention that this front end, I think it's important to mention, is funded by both Peace Health and the city. And the reason for that is that both parties are very interested in getting the feedback that we're gleaning from all of these efforts that I just talked about. So that front end piece, that situational assessment is co-funded. From there on out, it's a city project. Okay? Finally, I will talk about the evolution of the relationship, which I think is very, very interesting. A few things that I didn't know, I don't know if you know, but the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace opened the Little Flower Hospital in 1922. And I'm sure most of you know that. I thought the relationship really started in the 60s, but that is when the new hospital that's when the lease was entered into between the city of Ketchikan and the Sisters for the purpose of operating the Ketchikan General Hospital. The city then constructed in '63 that hospital, that new hospital. So then we jumped to 1981, and there was a lease that's essentially the lease that we have today, a 10-year lease that was entered into between the parties for Peace Health, or what was then the Sisters of Peace, to Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace, I should say, to continue the operation of Ketchikan Hospital. So from there, we have an amendment in '84, we have a land lease agreement in '93, and then we have a second amendment to that 1981 hospital lease, but it's basically updating references to the health system now to Peace Health. So there's not really, if you look at this throughout the years we've looked at it over this last 40 years. There's not really substantive change to that agreement, and it is essentially a lease agreement on leasing the property. So the lease in 2013 was extended once again through a 10-year amendment that goes through 2023. And as Lacey alluded to, we've got both parties saying, we think we need to address this now as opposed to later. It's a good thing for both sides to modernize the agreement, to figure out what's necessary, as I say, going forward. So that's why we're here. Okay. The current lease agreement, I won't go into too many details, but if you look on the left-hand side, you can see that the city of Ketchikan is basically owns the building and is responsible for structural changes and all of the support systems that go into that building, the HVAC, the electrical, etc. And they have to approve from Peace Health request any leasehold improvements that they want to make. And they obtain bonds if there's any structural alterations that are higher than $10,000. Okay, and as you know, there were structural alterations that were quite a bit more than $10,000 just a few years ago. Peace Health's responsibilities are much more operational, if you will. Their responsibilities are to operate the hospital according to certain rules, regulations, and bylaws, provide a reasonable volume of charity care, maintain and operate that facility, and make sure that it is Joint Commission approved and it meets state licensure requirements. So all the things it would take to operate a normal hospital. So it's Medicare certified. And they also are basically taking care of the ongoing operations. So they're paying the utilities, the rent, all of those sorts of things, the insurance premiums. They're providing an annual audit, a copy of the audit to the city, and they are paying a nominal rent for the facility. Okay? So basically, they're operating it, city owns it, there's a lease for the land, and there are certain sorts of reporting requirements and accreditation requirements that they have to adhere to. But compared to most of what we get involved with in terms of these agreements between municipalities and operators, it's pretty thin. This is pretty lean in terms of the stipulations on both sides. Okay. So in recent years, as you know, Peace Health has basically created an employed medical group, which includes essentially all of the providers that do the work inside the hospital. Okay, there are other providers in town, but that group, I think, represents about 30 providers, I think. Dr. Rice is at in ballpark. And they also provide on-call coverage for the hospital, and they rotate various specialties, as you know, up into the Ketchikan area on a regular basis. The second thing is to note is that the city of Ketchikan funded the new construction project to modernize and expand the hospital, which was a $62 million project, part of which was from a bond and part of it was from grant funding from the state of Alaska that represented a total of $19 million. So that resulted in a 72,000 square foot addition to the facility. And I will say this, just personally, it's one of the most beautiful critical access hospitals that we've had the pleasure to work in terms of the expansion that was done. So they did a wonderful job. And so this is where we are today. We've had developments which City of Ketchikan has stepped up and paid major money for. We've got Peace Health taking it on to create a medical group and expanding specialties. But where do we go tomorrow? That's the question. And now, if we move forward, it's time for you to speak. I'm going to have Kelly come up here and just talk about the parameters for for what we'd like to hear from you, and I'm sure some of you want to tell us what you want us to hear. So she's going to kind of define the things that we are very interested in hearing from you, and then we'll turn it over to you. So thank you.
I get the pleasure of going over some of the ground rules with all of you. And Lacey covered some of these already, so made my job easier. But first of all, thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for us to be here in your community to hear from individuals as well as a group like this about what's going on here and what are those key issues, the key priority areas for us to know about from all of you as we do the work that Kevin and Dan have described. So we've got the mics set up. We're going to ask you to come up and share your opinions. Please keep your comments to about 5 minutes and be cautious of sharing anybody's personal health information. Cousins, sisters, brothers, fathers, mothers, personal health stories are theirs to share. So just be aware of that. We also would like to hear your experiences. Complaints are fair game, but we also want to focus on where do we take this and move it forward. So focusing on being constructive, what could be better here in the community or through the hospital is what we'd like to hear. And of course, being respectful of others as always. There's an email address at the bottom of this slide, hospital.comments@ktn-ak.us. And this has been set up for anybody to submit comments in a very open format. So this is writing a letter via email. Lacey will receive it. She's been forwarding them to our team. So if there's something you're not comfortable saying today, you think of later, or you want to share this email address with your friends and family to provide additional insights after the meeting, please feel free to use it. Okay. So to help provide some questions to maybe address through this forum, really broadly, what we would like to learn from all of you and get out of this, and what we would work into our situational assessment, the phase 1 part of the project, can really boil down to about 4 questions. What are those key healthcare challenges that are facing you in the community, and how would you like to see Ketchikan Medical Center and the city address those? In your opinion, how could KMC improve the healthcare experience for patients and families? Patient experience spans from the second you make an appointment, maybe even before, until you're paid your bill. So anything in that gamut is fair game. Are there any additional services that you think should be here offered locally? And in your opinion, how could the hospital work more collaboratively with the community to improve health outcomes for all people living and working here in Ketchikan? So pretty broad questions, but wanted to provide some framework for thinking about our conversation today. In addition, there's some other topics, just very broadly, that we'd like to glean from all of you today in your comments, focusing on the patient experience, clinical services and quality, as well as healthcare resources. These are critical areas that we want to address through our situational assessment of what's happening here in Ketchikan and what should the priorities be moving forward. So there's some additional questions if it helps you think through how you might give your comments today. So I think with that, we can turn it over to the public comment section. Lacey will have some microphones, and the floor is all yours.
So as Kelly mentioned, there are 2 microphones at the front of the room here. We have a couple people who signed up at the start, and this is by no means the only way that you are allowed to speak during public comment, but we're going to start with the people who are on this list and go from there. So the first person that we have is Jennifer Clanko. You can go there. This is good. Okay. There's a button on the very base of the microphone that you'll need to push, and then unfortunately on this one, it's actually a little toggle switch. So
Are
they're
we
both
working now?
temporary.
Okay,
You're good.
Okay, good. Good evening. I guess being here early is my reward for being the first to speak. So my name is Jennifer Kalenko. I'm the rehab therapy manager, and I also actively practice as a doctor of physical therapy here at Peace Health Ketchikan. I am really pleased tonight to have the opportunity to come speak on behalf of my experience with Peace Health, not only as a caregiver, but a patient and also a family member of those that have received care in our community. My career at Peace Health began in 2003 and continued intermittently throughout my undergraduate and doctoral studies. I am a recipient of Peace Health's Community Scholarship, which assisted in a small portion of my doctoral or graduate studies. In return, I committed to returning to Ketchikan as a post-graduate school for my employment for 3 years. As you can tell, I am still here, and that's not just because Ketchikan is my home. I began my clinical career in 2011, practicing as a physical therapist with emphasis primarily in sports and orthopedic physical therapy, and have since expanded my interest to include treatment of dizziness, vestibular, and balance patients. At the completion of my residencies in Southern California at facilities such as Kaiser Permanente and Hoag Memorial Hospital, I didn't really know what to expect when I returned to practice and or if I would interact with the same level of care in which I was trained. However, upon returning as a medical professional, it was very clear that my previous understanding of what we were capable of here at Peace Health Ketchikan was no longer the same. I was so impressed at the level of expertise from local and visiting providers available in this community. The types of orthopedic procedures that we're able to perform in this small town was so impressive to me and comparable to many that I had experienced in my schooling. I also personally had the experience to experience that as a patient myself and with family members. I was and still am so proud to be part of that care in my community. As I advance my practice, Peace Health's been very supportive in efforts to maintain a high level of evidence-based practice. In addition to clinical work, I've had the opportunity for leadership development, allowing me to provide patient care on a one-to-one basis as well as from a leadership perspective. Since my transition to a management role in 2016, I've appreciated the administrative support that's allowed me to advocate for the needs of our therapists, providing retention and continuity of care, to advocate for our patients, to provide services that didn't previously exist, to participate in hospital-wide improvement measures, and to help with program development and services that otherwise would have required a referral off island. A recent example with this would be the development and implementation of our first wheelchair fitting clinic in May. This service previously was not available in Ketchikan and required wheelchair-bound patients to travel for these services. As a clinician and a leader, I felt supported in bringing this need forward and being able to send our staff to get the training needed to provide comprehensive wheelchair evaluations. Together with our vendor, New Motion, we were able to bring a trained assistive technology professional to be here live in person to provide these one-on-one fittings for our patients. The clinic was a definite success and the patients were really happy, and so were we to see this long-time need fulfilled. The rehab team is passionate about further program development and actively working to increase our pediatric rehab services. We've had great support from the Peace Health Foundation. We've also had great support from administration and are listening to the needs of our community to provide pediatric therapy. Over my 16 years of affiliation with Peace Health, I've observed the change of transition from that smaller hometown feel of Ketchikan General Hospital to more systemized Peace Health Ketchikan Medical Center.
1 minute warning, Jennifer. Sorry,
Okay,
thank you.
Don't worry, it's 30 seconds left. But having the opportunity to work with the leadership here at Peace Health, I see that change as opportunity. It's opportunity to provide increasingly exceptional medical care as a critical access hospital in Southeast Alaska. Opportunity to set our visions and our goals higher than we maybe otherwise could have. Knowing that we have the support, collaboration, and expertise of the larger system. I'm very honored to be a part of it and play a role in carrying on the heritage, mission, and values of Peace Health that have been in our community for almost a century. I'm proud of the care we provide, the people that I work with, and entrust our services not only to my hometown and to my patients, but to myself and my family. Thank you.
Thank you. The next name on the list is Joey Tilson.
I'm not as tall. Hi, my name is Joey Tilson, and I have previous experience working in healthcare administration, and I have a degree in healthcare administration. I have a lot of concerns about the care that Peace Health has offered many community members. You know, part of the Joint Commission, you know, I mean, there's over 22,000 hospitals nationwide that have this accreditation, which is part of what helps with federal money and that sort of thing. One of the things that, there's a certification for healthcare staffing services, and I feel that Peace Health is lacking in staffing appropriate medical educated individuals. Along that note, I have talked with many community members that have complained about the educational background of many of the people that have provided services, and they have had to go outside. One of the things that I find really disconcerting with the emergency room is when a person has to be medevaced out, they're not given the choice of a hospital of where to go to. Family member of mine was automatically sent to the Peace Health Hospital in Bellingham without having the option of choice, for one. The other part about it is that because we are limited on staffing, we're geographically challenged being on an island, and people, I mean, I've seen the videos of how to entice people to work at hospitals in Southeast Alaska. I worked at Bartlett Regional Hospital. I've worked at the Rainforest Recovery Center. I've also worked in 15 different clinics in South Seattle under Public District Number 1 with Valley Medical. And the main concern people have is that they don't want to live in Southeast Alaska in a rainforest. And so I feel like we're accepting, you know, the Western family brand of the educated background of some of the providers. And so what happens is our community suffers for this. Oftentimes the providers get to know the individual, that they judge them based on their situations versus them actually having a new medical problem. So that's one of the major concerns that I've been hearing about because I've actually been talking with a number of them. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes. The other part is that there is astronomical fees associated with some of the billing practices that goes on with the providers. We are the worst in cost for nationwide. In Alaska, we have the worst pricing, and so people go elsewhere. I mean, I have gone elsewhere and I get things for only a third of the cost. The next thing is that we're fundraising for medical equipment here, which is great that we care enough to do that, but why we have to do that is absolutely appalling to me. We're selling used shoes this weekend for the shoe solstice, you know, which I find horrifying. But even if we get this great medical equipment, we don't have the proper educated provider to run this equipment. And those that do come here, they don't stay, you know, and that's huge to me. It's like you find a good provider and they're like a good hairdresser or mechanic, they leave. And then we're charged this astronomical fee. And what happens with the money that's fundraised here, I would like to know the accountability of where the money's going to. I want to know why our insurances are being charged these astronomical fees and why that money's not in our community, why the providers are not being hired, the good ones, to take care of us, because this community deserves the best possible care. In fact, all communities do, but I know of the challenges. And so these are a few of the things that I have major concerns about. I want our community to live longer. I want us to thrive, and I want our providers to be accountable for their actions and to provide services that we have fundraised equipment for. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joey. Diane Gupat.
Good evening. I thought I was way down on the list, but anyway, I have somewhat of a personal story to share. I've lived in Ketchikan on and off for 30 years, so I've had considerable interaction with Peace Health. In fact, it used to be called Ketchikan General, right? So way back then, and familiar with the history, and raised a family of 5 children here, so had lots of broken bones and appendectomies and things like that. But one of the powerful stories I want to share, and I don't think I'm revealing anything publicly that many in Ketchikan don't already know, is when my grandson was diagnosed with leukemia. And it was amazing what the hospital did to respond to that. He was medevaced out of here within 8 hours. He had no immune system, so it was really scary because we knew a bacterial infection could have been fatal. And they made arrangements to not only medevac him, but they met him with an ambulance and got him to Seattle Children's. And the good news is he's 9 years old today. He was only 3 at that time, but he's survived. And thanks to a lot of this community, because it's not only the medical profession, but it's the community that supports families. And I should share that I grew up in a medical environment. My father was a doctor. And he was a bit freaked out that I was going to live on an island, but he actually broke his leg at Mountain Point fishing. And you know how doctors don't make the best patients sometimes? But at any rate, he had a lot of praise for his treatment here in Ketchikan at that time, and they helped him, and he had to leave early, but anyway, that was a good experience. I guess what I want to say is that for living on an island in our situation, I've been pretty thankful and at the level of care that we've received here in Ketchikan. Can it be improved? Absolutely. I understand the billing part. I used to work at Burien General Hospital in billing, actually, and that was probably one of my struggles, is the accounting wasn't local. And when I had questions about the bills, I had to deal with folks down in Bellingham or out of state, and that was a struggle. So I know they've made steps to improve that. And the other need that I would suggest we need here in Ketchikan is a detox center. It's a real struggle for people with substance abuse issues, and when they have serious medical emergencies, sometimes it's a struggle for us to get them good care, immediate care. So that's one thing I would hope we would add in the future. But overall, I've been very appreciative. My own broken leg healed. So I'm thankful for Peace Health. Thank you.
Diane. Thank you, Diane. I think this is Ed Bush.
Thank you. Thank you. This would be a question for any member of the team. Are you looking at an option for Ketchikan itself to manage the hospital? Is that something that you're addressing, looking at, giving a rough number? I'd say that because I grew up in Fairbanks. Fairbanks had a corporation up there managing. They finally got smart and they're managing their hospital themselves. Sure. But is that an option you're including?
We're not looking at any other options yet other than helping the city negotiate the best contract they can with Peace Health.
I'd say you better put that in because it absolutely is an option, and I don't think you're doing your job unless you say, okay, we've got Peace Health, we're not stuck with them, this is an option to manage it ourselves, this is what we're paying, and you probably know, you should know, it is public information. They've lied to me before. They're flat, oh, we can't tell anybody. You know about Form 990. Yeah. Mm-hmm. People should Google that and see what it's costing for some of the managers. That is my point is, even if you just do a rough estimate, you're not going to get it down to a penny, you're going to be guessing, but as an option, if the city took how many people and they would have to hire and what it would cost for those people. You know, it's an expensive business, and that's my big question. You know, maybe you'll have to shift gears and put that in. I
Well, I want to point out, we're in day 3 of what's probably
Sure.
a 120-day project.
Yes.
So the scope of what we've been asked to do so far is really to gather feedback from the community, make
Yes.
some recommendations on a negotiating strategy to the city. As Dan pointed out, there are phase 2 and potentially phase
Yes.
3 where the things are considered. So, I mean, honestly, that's the answer I'm going to give if there are other questions about what the answer might be, because we just don't know yet.
Oh,
But
sure.
we absolutely want your feedback, so
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
continue.
Oh, no, it's just, it was a question, and I think that if you haven't included that, that should be an option. It's definitely an option, and it should be included. Peace Health won't want to hear that, but that's too bad. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Ruth Doolin. I could bring you a mic, Ruth. Would that be? We can do that? Yeah. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you. I do want to say I am so happy with a bunch of things in the direction the hospital is taking. The rehab thing, great, and they just, well, more, it's happening more and more, but more and more the specialists, if they're not here, are just coming for a clinic, like a neurologist, regularly. There's so many people in town who need that. It's ridiculous. And, increasingly this town is not just us. It's all the tourists that come in the summer and people who are buying property who like it here. And, it's like it's a different scene. So, anyway, that said, so there are a couple of things about the physical layout of the hospital I've got a problem with. For one thing, and I've been saying this for years, the doors, the handicapped bathroom doors right off the, to the right of the desk when you come in, I can't open them. It's like it takes the strength of Hercules. What kind of handicapped accessible? So, that kind of thing. And there's a few glitches in various places, but especially once the whole new wing got added, it's been wonderful. So, there's one other thing, and I thought of this right kind of after I thought of saying something. Dr. Royce was talking about the expansion. There should be a connection for wheelchairs between the hospital and Fifth Avenue with all the services up there, with all the public health and the mental health and everything that's out there. Like, why can't handicapped people do it? I worked up there I had to always go around in the rain, go around. And for the tourists in the summer who need psychological services, so what I think we should do is a ramp that would probably have to go back and forth a bit and covered. And ideally, it would be all heated and all that, but, covered anyway. So, that's that. As to, I understand what the last gentleman was saying about the possibility that we could do it ourselves and it would work real well. But, I live right near the old hospital in the cottages where the nuns lived and the whole bit. And I think I've had some of the nuns that have been here I haven't felt so wonderful about, but mostly I have. And especially I just want to mention the young lady that was the physical therapy. Man, that has been such a blessing to my life. Both physical and occupational therapy. Incredible, just incredible. So, and just improving SRAM and speed. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah, it seems to me things are really just moving in the right direction in so many ways. I'm really happy about it. Trying to think of other specific concerns. I kind of tour around the hospital and poke it in various offices and see what's going on. I've made a couple of these suggestions that went before the board, and I think I'd like to be on the board. That would make sense, because I'm really interested.
1 minute, Ruth.
I don't know, I mean, I could probably go on forever, but probably off subject real fast. So I guess that's about it for now.
Thank you, Ruth. I have Kay Andrew on the list per Dick Coos.
I'm not pulling up either. Good evening. My name is Kay Andrew. I live at 506 Tower Road. I'm a lifelong Ketchikanite. I wanted to share tonight my latest experience at Ketchikan Medical Center. On October 4th, we were at our cabin on Prince of Wales, and I had a stroke. I was lucky enough to have TAC-1 have a plane in the air. They picked me up. I was in the ER within 2 hours and 15 minutes of having that stroke. The ER was wonderful. The doctor, the nurses, in fact, both the second floor and the ER were really good. I was admitted to the hospital, and I was there for all the tests that they gave me, and they were trying to find where the stroke came from, and they had no idea. So they did several tests, and that was like on the second day I was in there, the doctor came to myself and my family, and they said, we need an echogram, and it's 3 weeks out. They're full up. The hospital will not bring them in for overtime or on their days off. If they get too far behind, sometimes when the traveling doctors come in, they bring an assistant with them to help them get caught up with echograms. So my family, and they told me that Medicare and my backup insurance would not cover for any more time in the hospital. So my family was very upset because they said, you're sending this time bomb home, and what is it that we're supposed to do? Wait 3 weeks to get an echogram? Well, that was their answer. That was my option. I was sent south, had my echogram down there with a neurologist, and they treated me for what they could. I came home, and in April, on April 3rd, I had another stroke, this time in my eye, which I had no idea you could have a stroke in your eye, but you can. And back to the ER I went, and was lucky that I saw the same doctor that had treated me for my first stroke. And he ran a bunch of tests. He couldn't find anything. And so he wanted to do a brain MRI. And so he called upstairs and told them that he wanted to admit me for observation for the night. He didn't want me to send to go home and then have a major stroke at home in the night. And we were told that the hospital would not admit me because they did not have insurance that my Medicare or my backup insurance would pay for that. And so I had no choice. I went home. Again, I got on an airplane and I went back to my neurologist in Seattle. They did the tests on me. Well, excuse me, I'm a little ahead of myself. So when they would not admit me, the doctor in the ER was not very happy about that. And so he called Dr. Christensen at Ketchikan Eye Clinic, and he sent me up there. And Dr. Christensen did an exam. He took pictures, he dilated my eyes. He took pictures of the inside of my eye, and he found where a piece of plaque had gone into the small artery alongside your eye. I permanently lost about a third of my sight in my right top of my eye.
1 minute, Kay.
Okay. I went south again, and I've been being treated down there. I just came home this week, and they put a stent in. And so my story is that I think to help improve for other patients in the community, they should have someone on call. They told me in the hospital they have to medevac people if it's an emergency to get an echogram. Come on, we just spent millions of dollars on this new hospital. They need to hire somebody, either figure out how to work a couple of different of those machines and have a backup or something. So I think that is my main reason that I wanted to share my story, was because I think that you should seriously consider more help. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. So that's the end of the names that were put on the list. So now we're at the point where if anyone would like to come forward and share some additional information or suggestion, we can now start that process. Oh,
I'll let her go first.
and if you could please state your name when you start.
I'll do that. Sherry Bush, and I've been here for about 13 years. At one time I did work for the hospital, and now I'm retired. And I feel that we could really definitely benefit from having a doc in the box type of clinic here to take care of people that have last minute emergencies or things that need to go to a clinic, but there's no room in the clinic because all the slots are filled, and they can't take somebody that maybe a lady that might have a bladder infection, or guys that come in after fishing and they've had hooks put in, they need to be seen and get antibiotics and things like that, instead of those things going to the ER, which is very expensive, and you can just go in for a drop-in and see. That wouldn't utilize the clinics that are already busting at the seams, and it takes forever to get an appointment. So if we have one of those doc in the box that they have down in the lower 48, where there's somebody available to that, they can be managed by nurse practitioners, or and then referred on should they need something more. That's just a thought that might help out the community.
Thank you, Sherry.
Hi, it's me again. Sorry. So, Joey Tilson, and when I moved here from Seattle, Dr. Aaron Heidi was the Washington State neurologist who I was working with, and he was interested in doing stroke management here in Ketchikan. And he asked me to reach out to the accreditation department with Peace Health, as well as at Bartlett, because I had contacts at Bartlett. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to remote in with satellite in the emergency room to help with stroke management, and also come up quarterly to do stroke management. And what we found was, when I had reached out, was both hospitals required an application fee for him to apply to provide services to our community. He was hoping to keep the community members in the community instead of paying additional costs down in the lower 48 for lodging, rental cars, food, that sort of thing, to try and keep them home with their families and have the stroke management. And he was appalled. Back then, this was in 2006, there was approximately $850 fee for Bartlett. I can't recall what was quoted to me from Peace Health. But that didn't guarantee that he could provide the services. That was just an application fee that he was told to pay for the medical board to review. And he was actually quite appalled. He's like, I'm trying to help you guys. And the initial setup back then was $150,000 to set up the satellite system, to actually remote into the ER and help. And so I think that was one of the biggest struggles that I noticed with even Southeast hospitals, is that you have these application fees for providers to try and help a community, and it's like, why are we charging these fees? Now, I don't know if that's the current thing now, but also the idea of teledoc telemedicine, that sort of thing is not offered with Peace Health here locally that I'm aware of, as well as there is no satelliting in, and that might be an option. So that might be something to put in there. So that's all I gotta say. I have a lot more to say, but I'm not gonna, because I only got less than 5.
Thank you, Joey. Are there others?
Danielle McLennan. My experiences with Peace Health have been a mixed bag. Most of the time when I've gone to the ER, the ER doctors have been great, giving me good care. But there was one instance that involved my daughter. When she was 9 years old, the day after Christmas, she was sledding and she ran into a structure and broke her tibia, fibula, and the growth plate in her leg. She presented at the ER via ambulance. The ER doctor, I just want to say, the ER doctor and the ER staff were fabulous. The regular orthopedic surgeon was on vacation because it was Christmas, so they had a locum tenens orthopedic surgeon in there. The ER doc and the ortho doc did not see eye to eye on how my daughter's leg should be splinted. And the locum tenens ortho pushed the ER doc out of the way and very tightly bound the bandages on my daughter's leg, to the objection of the ER doc. But he's a locum tenens physician, so, you know, he has seniority over the ER doc. Fast forward 2 weeks, and my daughter is crying, writhing in pain that cannot be controlled. So I take her in to the orthopedic clinic. The regular doc is there, and when they removed the bandages, she had massive tissue necrosis because it was too tightly done. Now, we probably should have had her medevaced, but that wasn't offered to us. We took a commercial flight down to Seattle Children's Hospital, and her leg was in such bad shape she was directly admitted. They did some minor wound debridement. They sent her home. We had to go back 2 weeks later. And when we went back down, we didn't come back home for 3 months. She went through 6 surgeries to correct what was 100% preventable. If the locum tenens physician had just listened to the ER doc, she wouldn't have had to go through all those surgeries that took 1.5 years. I'm so grateful for what happened down there at Children's because they saved her leg. And she can walk and run and jump and do everything like she used to. But something needs to be done so that no other family has to go through a situation like that. My daughter's leg looks like a road map now, but I'm grateful that she has her leg and that she came through it. So I just think that there needs to be some extra care with hiring of locum tenens physicians. And I agree with other people as far as the billing goes. When I've been down south and I've had to present at the ER myself, it's cost about a half of what it costs here to go to the ER. And that's all I want to share right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
My name is Artis Benson. I've lived here 9 years, Alaska for 30 years. When I called to get an appointment, appointment was 8 weeks out. 8 weeks. Now, I'm not quite sure, but I think that is no medical care at all. The next time I called was about 2 months later, and I wasn't feeling well, and the appointment was 6 weeks out, and was told if it was an emergency to go to the emergency room. Well, it wasn't an emergency. I didn't feel good, I was sick, I needed to be seen by a doctor, not an emergency doctor. That is not any care at all, as far as I'm concerned. And 3 or 4 other people have told me the same thing. if you're gonna have the physicians, if Peace Health is gonna have the attending physicians, then you need to provide enough physicians to handle the community. The second problem is, last year I got something in my eye, had to go to emergency, went to emergency, and they came in and they put a numbing substance in it and told me I'd have to come back at 8 o'clock in the morning because they were full with people off the cruise ships. They'd had 3 heart attacks, and they didn't have any time to see me until in the morning. And really, that's no care either. If we can't provide care for the cruise ships and still provide care for the community. So I have a real problem with 6 to 8 week waiting period to see a doctor. If you're sick and you call up, you should be able to go to a doctor, not go to the emergency room, because I will not do that. It's cheaper to get on Alaska Airlines, fly to Seattle and go to Harborview than it is to go to the emergency room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lourdes.
She is exactly an example of what we could use having one of those situations where we have a clinic, doc-in-the-box type, that you can go to for that type of care and not wait the 4 and 6, 8 weeks. Because I have the same problem with waiting that long. There are issues that you can't wait 4 or 6, 8 weeks to be seen. That's a prime example.
Are there other folks who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Joe Williams. I first of all want to thank the City Council for having the opportunity to have this get together this evening. It's always really easy to talk about negative things. And it's really difficult to come up with solutions. I get the majority of my health care from Ketchikan Indian community. When they can't provide the care, I request to be sent to Anchorage. So I'm one of the fortunate few in this room that get, in my mind, excellent health care. And I'm really surprised at 8 weeks. You know, at KSC, that happened at KSC, there'd be a few people that are looking for work that are council members, okay? Because that's unacceptable. But I just want to publicly thank Ketchikan Council, Ketchikan City, for providing such a great hospital for us, with the visitors in mind, of course. But yes, I get very positive and very good care, and I seek it. But I want to tell you the other side of the story, and that is my spouse was looking to have colonoscopy. Simple thing in today's world. Please know it was cheaper for us to fly, my wife and I, to Portland, stay 2 nights at a hotel, and come back, than it was to have it done here in Ketchikan. She needs a knee replacement. She spent 5 months trying to nail down how much a knee replacement was going to cost here in Ketchikan. Couldn't get an answer. So she got an answer from folks in Portland, Oregon. It was cheaper to fly down and have that test done than it was to have it done here in Ketchikan. Now there's certainly something wrong with this picture. I think what was said earlier is that, you have a facility, in my mind, the best facility in Southeast Alaska we have right here in Ketchikan. That's called a hospital. which we, as far as the city is concerned, is renting to you folks to provide service for us. The kind of service that's provided for us is what I just heard this evening, is terrible at best. Now, it's really difficult to hear that, because I've been where you are when I'm told what you're doing, Mr. Williams, is terrible at best. So I know what it feels like. But publicly here, there's some folks here who struggle with health care, and it's unfortunate to have health care. This young lady, she and I grew up together. You know, it's sad that what she has been put through, all she wanted was health care. So there's some homework you folks have to do. Okay, and I pray that you do this homework and then give your report to the city council and have another one of these here so you can report this to us who are here this evening. So I just want to first of all say in closing, thank you very much for coming out to do this. It takes a brave person to do this, what you're doing tonight, and I want to thank you for that. But here's the deal, and that is, you come back 6 months from now, if you come back a year from now, and you hear the same stories, shame on you. It's a shame on you. A simple little request of how much it's going to cost to get a knee replacement. We need that information so that we can find out whether our insurance is going to cover it. Okay, so I would appreciate you sharpening your pins, keep them sharp, so that we can provide the kind of health care that elsewhere USA receives. And again, once again, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Joe. Are there others who would like to speak tonight?
Hello, my name is Jeremy Bynum. I didn't get up and plan to speak tonight, but I hear a lot of stories about bad outcomes, and those are heartfelt. Those are not always good. But we live in a community of 10,000 people, and we have a medical facility here that provides us with emergency care when we need it. I've had experiences at the hospital where I've had friends that have come and visited me here and had medical emergencies. I've had a friend that almost cut his hand off, went to the emergency room, and immediately received care that saved his hand. Immediately. I had another friend that came up here while we were out fishing off of Duke Island, and he got a fishing hook in his hand. And it was so severe he had to have emergency surgery as soon as we got back to town. 2 hours on the boat, back to town, immediately was in emergency surgery. He had to spend 3 days in the hospital. He saved his feeling in his hand. He could still feel his hand. He could still use his hand. Last year I had a friend that comes up here every year and visits me. For 8 or 9 years he's been coming here. And had a horrific accident down on the docks. Broke his leg. Complete fracture, bone out the side of his leg. Was at the hospital. Immediately got medical care that saved his leg. Stabilized him. Life flighted him. This community experienced a tragedy just weeks ago. And the community came together, and the hospital was on standby and treated those patients with trauma level care. And those that needed to be evacuated got together with the medical emergency staff to save their lives. That's the kind of care we need in a hospital with a community of 10,000 people. I know that we all want to have the best care in the world, but we live in a community of 10,000 people. If I need a heart transplant, I'm not looking for Ketchikan to do that for me. If I need a hip replacement, I'm not looking for Ketchikan to do that for me. It would be wonderful if they could, but we live in a community of 10,000 people. We need them to care for us in the event of an emergency. And they need to care for us in the event that I get sick and I need to go there. I've heard of long waits for appointments, and that may be true for specialized care. But I've been sick too. And I've never had to wait 8 weeks to go see a doctor. Never. Not once. I would challenge the community to look around the country, to look on an island of 10,000 people and see what kind of care you get from those hospitals. I grew up in a very small town, and I can tell you that that small town did not have the level of care that Ketchikan Medical Center, Peace Health, provides to us. So I'm just saying, take an opportunity to look around, see what's provided around here. Ketchikan's looked at as a savior in emergency crisis. If you're on POW and you have a problem, you fly here. If you're in Wrangell and you need to give emergency birth for your child, you come here. We're a very small community in a very big state, a long way from a lot of care. And Ketchikan Community Hospital, Peace Health, provides that care when we need it. So I just want us to think about that when we talk about all the negative outcomes that possibly can happen. There are multitudes of positive outcomes. It's just unfortunate that those that have positive outcomes don't come up and speak. So I feel compelled to come up and speak tonight because I've seen great outcomes from emergency care that's provided at our hospital, Peace Health. They provide an enormous amount of services. Are they always the cheapest? No, they're not. But they don't see thousands and thousands of patients like those hospitals in Portland, with 1 million+ people there to access them on a daily basis. So I just want to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to come up and speak, and thank you very much for coming to help our community decide what's best for moving forward with the hospital. So I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. My name is Cindy Bird, and I have lived here for almost 30 years. And I have many experiences with Peace Health, but I have two very life-saving ones I would like to share with you tonight. Very inspired by both of you gentlemen speaking, because I was not going to do this. So about 9 years ago, I had a very severe head injury. And I'll just say I went to the ER and immediately was cared for. And when I opened my eyes and saw that I was in the trauma room, that is when I got a little bit scared. But I'm here, I'm upright, walking and talking. Long story short, therapy, here I am, working through the disability of that, but I am here. I had a second one about 2 years ago. I went in for a back injury that I wasn't really treated for that, because in that exploration found a cancer tumor that a week later was down south because it couldn't be taken care of here. A week later saw a specialist there who was only one of 5 in the entire nation that could take care of what I actually had. A week after that, I was in a surgery room. It was all taken care of, and I came back here, and I did receive on the other end of that spectrum the billing. Went down there and did many, many things. I won't list, all the tests and the surgery and all that. Came back here for one MRI that cost me almost as much as all of that did. So being on both ends of that spectrum, I just want to applaud both these gentlemen for being able to speak to that, because yes, I've had 2 life-saving events, but I have less years ahead of me than I do behind me, and I am concerned about that cost of it happening again. Can I afford the health care? So I agree with both these gentlemen. I have had life-saving events, and I'm so grateful. I cannot express my gratitude for being upright, walking, and talking.
but at the same time, my concern about will I ever be able to afford that with the healthcare benefits that I have now. So I agree with Joe that there are some things that need to be addressed in that so that it can be affordable healthcare, but I also applaud you for the excellent care that we have. And so I think both these gentlemen bring out great points, and I just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Would anybody else like to speak?
I'm Jay Cadle. So I came, the healthcare has improved a great deal in the 20 years that I've been here. I won't go into the negatives when I almost died a number of years ago because of poor care. But things have gotten much better. Can they improve? Absolutely. Last year I had an injury. My arm is better. Awesome. They ordered the wrong brace. Caused a lot of problem. And then they forgot to do the referral. Caused more problems. But my arm is better. Wasn't life-threatening. And I make mistakes. We're still a lot better. What I actually came for is a frustration that I have. I'm a bookkeeper. I work with a lot of clients. And one of my clients recently had to do some billing with the hospital. Every single bill took 3 to 6 months to get paid. Every single bill took hours of my time emailing, calling, following up again and again and again. You didn't put the PO. Yes, it's right there under PO. Well, you didn't put the guy's name. Yes, it's right there under his name. Well, he had to sign it. As you can see, he did. And that was just when they bothered to return my calls or bothered to return my emails. We called here, we called there, we called everyone. I have never worked with any company that was so difficult to get paid, and it was tens of thousands of dollars to a very small company. It hurt. It hurt a lot. And it's really frustrating that this hospital comes to the city for money regularly, that they put people in collections so quickly quite often, that their bills are so darn difficult. I used to do medical billing and I cannot read the hospital bills. That says a lot. And yet they don't pay. They ignored every interest charge. They ignored every finance charge. They never paid a one. Months and months to get paid. And I don't think that that's right. And I think before the city ever considers giving the hospital another dime, they need to work out their payment policies and how they pay. And they need to have phone numbers and emails that work and are responded to. And they need to have people in their own system that understand how their system works. Because our companies can't afford this. This is a really small town. And we have a lot of vendors who are not rich. You know, so I'm really frustrated with that. It was a huge, huge waste of my time to deal with that. And there was never any apology by the Vancouver office, not one apology. I got apologies from one person locally, and she said, I used to do the payments. If I was still doing the payments, you would be paid by now because I can see you have everything. I think it took 2 more months to get paid after that. So anyway, I wanted to express that. That's a real frustration. My client actually couldn't be here. He was going to come, but he had another commitment. So I came on his behalf. So thank you.
Thank you, MJ. Would anybody else like to speak?
Dave Kiefer. I was actually born in the old Bodden Street Hotel. Yeah, it was an expensive hospital. So is the current one. I recently had one of those wonderful middle to late age, health scares where you end up having to go to the emergency room in the middle of the day because you're not sure if you're dying or not. And It's interesting because it's the first time we actually not been there on the holiday. My family is known at the hospital as the holiday family because for about the first 8 years of my son's life, every holiday, Christmas, New Year's, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July, one member of our family was in the ER. It got so bad that we hired a guy where I work now, who's one of the former ERs. He goes, I know you. You're the guys who always come in on holiday. So very familiar with the hospital. And this comment, I'll keep very brief, has two parts. So one is the good part, the other part is the not so good. The good part is like, as we almost always have in the numerous times we've gone to the ER, we got great. You know, I got great service. I was there for about 3 hours. The nurses were wonderful. The ER doc was busy, but he was very professional. Everything was as I wanted, and obviously I didn't die, so the result was a good one. So the second part, a month or so goes by, and the billing starts. And what is ironic to me is we've been having discussions with the hospital and everyone else for the last year about the billing. And what we've heard over and over again is, we are fixing that. We are going to make changes. In fact, we talked about actually having a city ordinance that would require them to follow the Anchorage model of telling one exactly what your bill is before you leave. And they said, no, we don't need that. We're fixing it. Well, guess what? It wasn't fixed, at least in my situation. And it wasn't fixed in two ways. Out of curiosity, before I left the ER, I said, hey, can you guys give me that little piece of paper that tells me what this is going to cost roughly? And I was told, we're really too busy for that. And that's okay because, frankly, in the ER, they are busy. I get that. But I didn't get that piece of paper that had been promised. And then, about a month later, the multiple bills started coming from people, from companies, doctors, who knows what they were. For all we knew, they could have been scams. We didn't know. And we're trying to figure out what's a bill, what's not a bill, this has been paid, that's been paid. And once again, there's just no sense of, okay, you went to the ER, here's what it costs. So we know. And currently the number is somewhere north of, well north of what it should be for a 3-hour visit to the ER, but we all know that's an expensive part of the process. But when you're talking about a number somewhere $14,000 to $18,000, we're not sure exactly where, for 3 hours, that seems a little high. And like I said, it's hard to tell whether we paid this one or not. I'm very fortunate now. I have very good insurance. It's going to cover roughly 90% of whatever that charge is. That's still going to leave us with a couple $1,000s probably. And I understand that's an improvement because once upon a time, going back about 10 years, I worked at a place that didn't have quite as good insurance. And I would spend weeks, because they would say, well, what they charge you, that's not realistic. That's above the fee we think's reasonable. I'd say, as this gentleman pointed, I'm on a little island in Alaska with 13,000 people, by the way, who, things cost more here, and then insurance company would say, well, we don't care. Our thing says it should cost $6,000, and they charge you $8,000, so we're not covering the $2,000. So this is good. We're beyond that stage personally. But there are an awful lot of folks out there who aren't. And I guess, I love the care I have always received at Ketchikan Hospital. Back to the first time, what I remember of it. But why can't, does the billing have to be this hard? Does it have to be this impossible? Does it have to be so, Byzantine that you can't even, add A and B and get C? You have to go 4 other different ways. So I guess I would like to see in the future some way to truly address that and not just hear from the hospital that we're addressing it and then go back and find out they're not addressing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Generally, Gage. I think after listening to everybody, there's a few things that I'd like to add to the list that I think need to be addressed. And that's one, what Joe was talking about with billing, but having a requirements for fees, having that list of what you're going to pay for something in there. And then also, from what I heard from Kay, the issue with not getting a room because you're not insured. So here's my thing. We are a nonprofit hospital. I want to know not what the people who raise money, the foundation does, but what the hospital contributes to this community
for people who cannot afford. So Kay, in my opinion, should have ended up getting a room to make sure that she was okay and safe, and that whether her insurance covered her or not. And I think this is an issue that is state worldwide anymore when it comes to medical insurance and medical care, is that it's now about the dollar. It's not about the individual. It's not about personal care. And I know from personal experience, because 24 years ago, I was in Harborview for a month. I know what care looks like. I know what it's like to be treated by the best. And I also know what it's like to be in this hospital and be treated by the best. But I also know what good billing looks like. And this isn't it. It used to be really good when we used to do it. When Ketchikan did their own billing, it was good. When I got my bills after my accident in May 31st, 1995, I could read them. I am not in the medical field. I am not a doctor, but I can read my bills. I can go to Harborview and get my services that I need for my medical, get treated with dignity, and also get a bill within 3 weeks that tells me everything we did. And the other thing I get, when I go down for a week, if I need to see a specialist, right then and there, they're going, okay, where can we move her? Who can we get in? Who can we get her to see? So I get where people, when you have to wait 3 weeks, 6 weeks to see the psychologist, to get your medications for mental health, that's not plausible. A person who needs mental health medication shouldn't be waiting 6 weeks to see that doctor to keep their medications. So I got them all on my list, but one of the things I think most important is that I think the staff is amazing, but there's so many things that we could do better. But I also think that if it's a nonprofit and people are not getting services because their insurance won't pay for it, where is that piece of the puzzle? They shouldn't be sent home if they're not certain that that person isn't going to have a stroke later on. They should be seen, they should be given a room and taken care of. Regardless, that used to be the rule, right? It used to be we don't care above what you can pay. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Stevenson. I said to Kim tonight I was going to come with duct tape on my, but here I am. I came because I wanted to see how a community forum was held and conducted, and I'm impressed that we all came out. We have suggestions and opinions. So I throw the challenge back to the mayor and to the city manager. We need a community forum on tourism, the docks, and the new Ward Cove. We need an update sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there others that would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Sam Bergeron. Everybody hear me okay? The comments that I just wanted to make was my friend Joe Williams came up and spoke about the really excellent care that we receive at Ketchikan Indian Community. We have very limited resources here locally, but we are able to get in for the flu, for just about anything very quickly, and even the same day. So if you really have a need, you can just go there and be seen. And so I think, you know, from what a lot of the comments that we're hearing tonight is that an urgent care, something that's of less quality than the emergency room and cost, is something that we should definitely invest ourselves in. Other folks have mentioned mental health and alcoholism and drugs. Well, right now, to the best of my knowledge, these folks wind up at the already overburdened emergency room and ill-staffed to handle this kind of an issue. So obviously there's some problems that we should take a hard look at to fix and to build into our agreement if we can, or to put resources toward the things that we need done. And so I'm really glad that all the folks came out tonight and gave us your comments. We're listening very carefully to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam.
And I agree with the emergency care services. I think that we are amazing at crisis level in this town. We always have been. We got people that step up to the plate, amazing. I do think, sir, and this isn't a complaint, or I don't think anything I've heard tonight was negative. I think that we need to be heard and see if we can come up with a solution. I think long-term care, and I don't mean just long-term care in the hospital. I do have experience with that. My husband was in there 5 years. I was there every day. But I mean services that are not immediate. We need a little more people, more help. I don't know if Peace Health can help us. I like Sherry's idea of the doc in a box. Is that what you said? That's a good idea. Somewhere that's not quite emergency level. Because not all of us can afford to go to the emergency room. I have fairly good insurance, but I can't even afford the extra overflow after the Medicare and my private insurance. I also can't afford to go off the island unless I am referred. I don't have a choice to do that. I'm so glad you were able to. So I think that these are things that, as I'm understanding, this is what you want to address and see what we need and what we want. I think I have a couple of things that might be hopefully a solution. I've talked about them after being in the long-term care with my husband and seeing many things that really boil down to not enough hands. There's plenty of good people and they do their job. I praise them, I bless them, I am so thankful for them. But I also saw a whole lot that was just because there weren't enough people. An example, one of my ideas was something along the lines, I call it the old-fashioned candy stripers. Today it would have to be a new approach, I would think. And this is because, such as in the long-term care, I saw different times where people come in and this is something they weren't expecting, they're older there. And even in the med-surg sometimes, but they're there and the first day or two they're fine. And then this is not home for them. Their family come and see them once or twice a day, but all those other hours, they're sitting in a chair by themselves. And there are people in and out of the room, but many times I saw people left alone, and not because somebody didn't do their job. You cannot be in the same place. If you've got 2 nurses for 28 patients or whatever, sometime it's going to happen. And there's, I think, 4 CNAs for the whole floor. They are amazing what they do. For the money they do, I wouldn't do what they do. But one of my suggestions is something to do with the college or the high school, a class, a program that people can sign up and want to learn about medical field. They get vetted, they get fingerprinted, they get explained what they can do and what they absolutely cannot do. Because basically, I think they could be extra eyes. They come and they sit with a patient that's been there 3 days now and is getting care, but they're just out of their element and they're not eating. And the food is set down before them, but there's not enough people to sit down and feed everybody. And it's not that they can't feed themselves, they're just not interested. And so having somebody that can come along and say, oh, hey Mary, how's your dinner tonight? Let me see. Oh, you only eaten half? How about another bite? You know, and then they get to eat. Whereas I've seen people get their food, they're offered a bite, and the person has to go do the other people, and they come back and they say, oh my goodness, that's all you're going to eat tonight? And everything's marked and signed what they ate and off they go. That happens several times, and it's not because, like I said, somebody doesn't care or isn't doing good work. There's not enough hands. So I offer that program as an idea, and I wonder about something like maybe a floating medical team, I put it that way, because oftentimes ER, like you said, is always an emergency level, but sometimes it's over and above, and you can't have people just sitting around. But if you have a doctor and so many nurses that maybe are on call for the extras when something happens, when they're not busy, even long-term care, from 5 to 7, that phone rings off the hook. And there's nobody, they don't have time to answer it. But it is important to people. So I
About
think
30 seconds,
my
Sharon.
5 minutes, I didn't think I could even talk at all. Now you can't shut me up. I got one more. I think I lost it. Let's see. There's something to do that's not clear in my mind. I don't understand, but I'd like to know from Peace Health as to how many beds and how the accrediting works, because I think when there's only so many beds and something happens, people can't get long-term, they're medevaced out of here, or they go south or whatever. I had one instance, my husband in the hospital, 5 years, he got sick, too sick for long-term care. They offered med-surg. They said if he goes to med-surg, it's too full, he's gonna go south. And I said, well, I don't want him to go to Seattle for this. So I'm just wondering if those are being addressed. I'd like to understand how that works, because maybe we can change how many beds for this size town. Thank you so much. And I do appreciate all that do their job.
Someone else like to speak? There's someone in the back. Hang on just a minute, Joey.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tessa Axelson. I'm here in my capacity as a T-ball manager. We didn't send any kids to the ER tonight. That felt like a pretty good success. In all seriousness, though, I too was born in the hospital in Ketchikan, not the Bauden Street facility, a different one. And I'm here tonight speaking as a patient of the hospital and as a mom with 2 kiddos who are 4 and 6. And I want to talk about our interaction with the hospital in terms of continuity and how that relates to quality and cost and access, which I think is something all of you care about and all of the residents care about, and I know the folks at Peace Health care about. So specifically, I have a kidney transplant. I'm 10 years post-transplant. That transplant was done at UW. That makes me a little high maintenance when it comes to being a person living here in this and operating in this facility. I need a lot of review, I need labs, I need to have a lot of active communication with doctors in other locations. For me, that's primarily Seattle. I've had exemplary relationships with providers at different levels from different departments with Peace Health. I have also had really poor experiences. I want to be really clear though that that's not just about Peace Health. That exists in lots of different systems. No system is a panacea. We all need to recognize that. However, I do think we should spend some time talking about what it means to be a patient who is medically complex, has higher needs. I feel like I'm very versed in healthcare because I had complex things that have happened to me. I had complex things happen with family members. It is a language I don't necessarily wish that I spoke, but I do speak it. I am an exception. So what does it mean if someone is coming into a setting and they are seeing a locum, a visitor, a hospitalist? Here's what all that means. You have a doctor that you don't know. You've been seeing someone you did know. You had a relationship with them. We'll call that continuity of care. And that doctor talked actively with other providers that you had, and suddenly you're seeing someone new. Let's just theoretically also say that it happens to be in a circumstance when you have a 6-day-old baby who needs to be medevaced. This is not an ideal time to suddenly have a new friend who you need to explain complicated things to. And I tell you this story because I have 2 sons, they're 6 and 4. Our 4-year-old was medevaced from the facility here when he was 6 days old because he had viral meningitis. That medevac saved his life. That was good. The circumstances around it were wonderful. He's living. He's highly functional. If you've seen around town, you know that. The reason I bring it up, though, is one of the challenges that Peace Health has had for some time is recruiting and retaining personnel. This matters for purposes of quality of care. It matters for purposes of cost, not only to a patient, but also to the hospital. And it also matters for access. And so I say this as a person, aside from being a patient, aside from having children, who also has a very lengthy history in health facilities. I've managed them. I've built them around the state. I know the tribal system very well. I headed up contracting for tribal health systems up in the north for doing recruitment. I understand there are complexities with recruiting and retaining people. We have to do a better job of it in this community. Patients are reliant on that. It costs money. We pay more. The hospital pays more for personnel that come in on an itinerant basis. It doesn't mean they provide poor care. It's more costly. And it also isn't best for patients. And I would really love to see, not Peace Health go away, I would love to see us have more conversations about what the expectation, as a parent, expectation is everything. It's also everything in a lot of relationships. As a patient coming in the doors to the clinic, what are the expectations of how I should behave? If I call and I have what I perceive to be an emergency, what can someone who first answers the phone say to me that helps me understand what the process is, what referrals look like, what the load is for doctors? How can I make the most time of the providers I see? How can that be a quality experience for me? As a new parent, for those of you who are parents, you'll recall this, or if you aren't a parent, you may not know. First 2 years of life, your kiddo sees a doctor, even if they aren't sick, anywhere between 10 and 20 times, like a regular scheduled set of visits. That is overwhelming. And then to not see the same provider can also be challenging. So I just think that there are so many opportunities for this community at 13,000 people to have a more robust system. The system is getting more complex. We now have other independent providers that have practices. What is the expectation about how we're communicating all of that? As people using the system, as the system back to its users, and how are we all involved so that we continue to have high quality healthcare that is accessible, that is affordable, and that we all understand. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa.
Many of you may or may not know that Peace Health does offer the Charity Care Program. It's the Bridge program. Also, I was a previous social worker, and so there's hospital presumptive eligibility for people that are seen in the emergency room. But many of these programs to help with financial burden in regards to your health care, there is a social services person at Peace Health that actually has this information. And I feel that Peace Health doesn't really advertise it. And the only reason I know that many hospitals don't advertise it is they don't want to encourage it. Having worked in a previous hospital district, it was, no, we're not going to post it. But if they call Patient Financial Services, we'll tell them about it, which I think would be ideal with Peace Health, to be able to let people know how to educate themselves with financial health care, you know, so, and the only reason I know all this stuff is because as a social worker, it was a personal interest for me to be able to help the community, and I actually sought out these information myself, and I don't think it should be that hard for the community to go through such financial mental anguish. If they know that there's actually services there, they shouldn't have to go hunt and peck for it. It should actually be offered to them right off the bat as a social services person of Peace Health. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I'm Tina Isbell, and so Peace Health 4 years ago, I set up a primary care doctor, and I don't have a lot of health issues, and I don't have to see a doctor. I haven't seen one in the past 4 years. And I made a phone call a couple of months ago to try to set up an appointment with my primary care doctor that was set up 4 years ago. And I was told they were busy and that I needed to call Creekside. If I wanted to call Creekside, I would have called them. So that was really frustrating that that there were not enough primary care doctors to provide an appointment for myself. And I just feel like and it's not just the primary care, OB has problems with appointments, and I have small children as well, and pediatrics has a huge problem with trying to fit your sick kids into doctor's appointments. And I would like to see a change in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Any other comments, suggestions, thoughts? It's just sort of a last effort here before we probably wrap up for the evening. Kelly, would you mind going back to one of the slides with some of the, oh, sorry, the mic, it's right here, I could have done it. Just last food for thought for all of you, some things to consider. Yes. In case something jumps out at you. And again, this is not the only or last opportunity for our consultants to hear what you might have to say. As Dan indicated, we are hoping to have another forum later on in this process and share some of the data that ECG has collected. And there's also an email, as we showed, and we'll show it again here at the end, if you'd like to speak your mind that way.
Could you put that web address up there again?
Sorry about the web. So it's hospital-comments@ktn-ak.us. So if you think of something later or you'd like to share something more privately, that's an opportunity to do that.
Can you put this up on like Facebook?
It is on Facebook. It's also on the city's website. And certainly you can give me a call, which is actually the last slide. You can get in touch with me if you have questions or concerns about the project. There's my email and phone number, 228-5603 at the city manager's office. And we do have one more person.
I just have a quick question. My name is Judy Auger. I've lived in Ketchikan since 1952. My husband was born here. All four of my children were born here. I was scrolling through your website today because in full disclosure, my sister, Virginia Adams, worked at Peace Health for 32 years at that time, Wilson Medical Clinic. And at one time, when you first set up your clinic over in Craig, some of the docs from Ketchikan were going over to Craig to facilitate that facility. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I just noticed that it said on the website that the Craig Medical Clinic is licensed as part of Peace Health Ketchikan Medical Center. So my question is, how are you staffing that clinic in Craig?
So Judy, just to be clear, so our consultants, ECG Management consultants, are in contract with the city of Ketchikan that owns the hospital. But with regard to your question, I might actually just bounce it over to Dr. Peter Rice if you would be willing to address Mrs. Auger's comments.
Yes, as you stated, we do operate a clinic in Craig, I think for maybe 6 years now, and the staffing model is a family practice doc named Dr. Justin Lang, and then a nurse practitioner. So that's our staffing model, and then a team, of course, of nurses and everyone else.
So are you pulling docs from Ketchikan to go to Craig?
Only in times of need. For example, we do have to pull Dr. McNeil there for 2 days next week and 1 week in July because of needing some coverage that we couldn't get for Dr. Lang by another means. But no, we're not like on a regular basis robbing Peter to pay Paul. So.
But when you pull Dr. McNeil from Ketchikan to go over there, that's one less doc you have in the clinic.
Absolutely, yeah.
In Ketchikan.
Yep, no.
So
it's,
I guess personally I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Since my husband had a situation where he, it ended up that he was finally diagnosed with having a stroke after I had to end up taking him to Seattle. Could not get in to see my primary care physician for a month. And he ended up in the ER. It was a bad experience. So I said that I would not have the ER doc who saw him on a Monday, and I went back on a Wednesday with him, and I said, no, he's not going to be on my husband's service. I bought an airplane ticket and took him to Seattle. So it was not a good experience, and that's not always been. Like I said, I've been here forever. Related to Bob and Jennifer. And these things happen. I understand that. But when you have ownership in this hospital, you know, we've been paying taxes since I was 19 years old because we owned our own property. Now, of course, that we are over the age of 65, we don't have to pay property taxes except for our Georgian property. But I was really discouraged with the attitude of the ER physician because they don't have ownership. You contract to those docs to come in. It's a revolving door. You have a few that have been here forever. I felt like they did not have any empathy for my husband's situation because he became very agitated, and if any of you know my husband, he can be very volatile, vocal, says things that are inappropriate. And I got a lecture from the doc about what the ER department does and does not do, and I said, young man, I take exception to what you're saying. If you can't handle someone who has suffered a stroke, who's very agitated, you're really in the wrong profession. And I need your assistance to call my primary care physician and get him set up for an MRI because he informed me that they don't do that in the ER. They don't order MRIs. So, long story short, when I found out he was on the service on Wednesday when we got things settled, I said, no, he's not caring for my husband. So, and I've had a discussion with his primary care physician, and we have decided that when issues arise with his problems, that the primary care physician will then call the specialist in Seattle, and they'll have the discussion, and we will decide what we need to do. So as a last resort, I won't take him back to the ER, unless, sometimes you have to, but it wasn't a good experience, Dr. Rice. So, and I'm not we're not people that go to the ER because we have an ingrown toenail. We can deal with that at home, but this was, it was not good. And I think I guess what I want to say is there needs to be better communication between the ER doc and your primary care physician. Because it ended up was all he had to do was pick up the phone, call Dr. Sanders, get the appointment set up so he could have an MRI. Was that so hard? Instead, I had to be the nasty old gray-haired lady, which I don't have a problem being at times, but you shouldn't have to do that when you're, I've been dealing with this for 5 days, and Kay, as you know, when you have a stroke, you're not rational. So it was a night and day thing, and so I go to where I thought he would get the best care, and then I'm treated like I'm the village idiot because I don't know what an ER is all about? Excuse me? Really?
So 1 more minute, Judy.
Anyway, I just think that you need more communication between, and one last thing, and I hope this has been resolved. 3 years ago, when my mother was dying, she was admitted through the ER. The ER did not know that she was a do not resuscitate, although we had filed the paperwork with the hospital, we had filed the paperwork with her primary care physician, we'd filed the paperwork with the Pioneer Home, and when we filed a complaint, we found out that her do not resuscitate papers were in the ethics department. So I hope that's been resolved, that when you bring somebody that's 98 years old in through the ER, that it's flagged in your computer system that this is a do not resuscitate individual.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you, Dr. Rice. I appreciate you answering our question on operations. Any other comments? Well, I think with that, if there are no further comments, I'd like to again thank all of you for coming tonight and for voicing and sharing your stories and your concerns and your thoughts and suggestions. We really very much appreciate that. Again, the City of Ketchikan will continue working with ECG Management consultants over the next several months, and we will be reporting back on progress probably in about another month. So again, please feel free to give me a call, use the emails, and thank you very much again for your participation.